But first, what I'd like to do is kind of go around the horn here and have everybody just introduce themselves real quick. So, Robin, say hi. Tell us what you do.
Oh, hi. I'm Robin from Indonesia. I own a rental company called Focus Equipment, and we primarily provide workflow solutions for high resolution capture. So we provide red cams, Alexa stuff for mainly feature film clients.
Big stuff. Felipe, say hi.
Hello, good evening, afternoon, everyone. Thank you
It's
for
a
having me
global
here,
audience.
Chris.
Not a problem. What have you been working on? I know you just did a big live thing, didn't you? Last week?
Uh,
2 weeks ago?
last week I was talking to about technology of post-production, and basically I started a riot between the assistant editors and the editors in Brazil, apparently, and people were not very happy with me because of
Well, that
that.
sounds like a story for another day. Let's, Oliver,
Hello.
introduce yourself, please.
Hi. I'm Oliver, and I'm an editor and colorist. I've been doing this for many years, and also write for a few websites and trade articles, including FCPCO and a few others.
If you've been in this business a while, you've certainly read one of Oliver's articles. Malcolm.
Yeah, hi, I'm Malcolm Count. Work for NEP in the UK. Work in the media solutions area, so we look after coming up with innovative and new ways for dealing with clients' requests and how we might move that around the whole NEP business. So it's quite a lot of my background is post, so hence why I'm here.
Thank you. Jace.
Hello, yes, I am Jace Sparks. I'm the VP of Product for Q Media. We run, set up, manage television networks all over the world. And our flagship network is the Q India, which reaches currently about 500 million people. And we love Final Cut Pro X, and that's what we use to build those networks.
Cool. Who's this guy? Sam Mestman? What do you do?
I'm Sam. I live in my parents' basement, and and I don't know very much about this. I just happened to stumble on this Zoom room, and mostly I'm excited
And
to
I have
hear
some
what everyone
pictures
else
I want
has
to
to
show
say.
you.
I'm looking forward to forming my opinions on Apple based on this conversation.
And Tim, tell us who you are.
Hi guys, from the UK, work for NEP, specialise in post-production engineering. And yeah, just trying to keep abreast of Final Cut Pro.
Cool.
And what Pete Wiggins wants us to get into.
Awesome. All right, so before we go any further, I want to thank the good people at OWC, Otherworld Computing, or MacSales.com. They have awesome SSDs, external hard drives, expansion products, enterprise storage solutions. And I actually have a prop I want to show you. Hold on, let me grab this. Too many buttons to press here. This is my favorite OWC product. This is a thing, they call it the 4M2. Now, this is something I bought recently. It's filled with NVMe chips. Those are the really fast memory sticks. This is a 4 terabyte drive. And when I attach this thing to my Mac, it specs out speed-wise, both read and write, as fast as the internal SSD in the iMac. So super fast. Excuse me. Super fast, really great, simple. And I got to say, when I bought it, I actually kind of installed the chips myself, but I bought the wrong chips. I was trying to, whatever. And the people at OWC were awesome to help me through that whole process. And then we also want to thank iIndustrial Revolution. And without OWC and iIndustrial Revolution, this show wouldn't exist. So it's great to have support from people in the community. And I think Peter's a big fan of iIndustrial. Isn't that right? He's got his mic muted. He's trying to make sure everything's working over there. All right. So WWDC yesterday, show of hands. Did we all watch at least some of it? Yep. We're all there. Great. First of all, what did you guys think about the just the production value? And we're going to get all the nerdy tech stuff, but did you like watching it as a pre-taped event? Do you think we missed out on something?
I thought it was good. Having sat through a lot of vendor webinars recently, as we all have, I'm sure, it was very slick. I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I think for anybody who does corporate video, it's certainly something you look at and go, gosh, guess we got to emulate that now the next go around.
Well, people have been emulating Apple for decades, like, oh, what are they doing? I guess. I mean, how many people have been in a meeting where somebody said, I want to look like Steve Jobs on stage. I was like, oh, you don't have enough money to do that, but we'll try.
It did strike me as at the very beginning of Federighi's part, I wasn't quite sure if the whole thing was a virtual set or not.
I'm glad you said that, Oliver. I've had a bunch of discussions about that. Do you think it was all shot practical at the Steve Jobs Theater?
I think it was all shot practical, possibly with the exception of maybe the wider opening shot. But when you look at some of the dolly moves and you see a little bit of a bump in the background and stuff like that, it seems to me that it was definitely all practical with large LED screens or something like that.
Yeah, I go back and forth on it. I think sometimes the looking at the screens and having worked with Apple in the past, they like to defer decision making, and I can imagine them saying, "We're not ready. The graphics aren't ready yet. We're not ready to put them up on the screen. Just, we'll replace it later." I'm not necessarily saying that they put green in it, but motion tracking is pretty powerful these days. I thought some of the camera movement was a little gratuitous, like. Somebody said, the camera is always moving, but I don't know. I thought the information got across well. Anybody else have any thought on that, on the production value? Felipe?
Well, I think it enabled them to have a much tighter event with much more information that they would have put on live, because they would need to go through all of that, handing over microphone and so on and so forth, and claps and everyone applauding. And I don't know, I preferred it this way because we could see more of the Apple campus, not just a stage that we are used to. They could show off a little bit more and pick our curiosity with the camera going underground and going to the labs where you see a lot of Mac Pros in the background and computers opened up. And I think they did a good job with the script and the playfulness. You saw Craig Federighi running from downstairs in
fun.
one of the places.
That was my favorite transition.
Go up, and he's really good on camera. So it was fun. I think it was a fun event to watch.
Sam, you've been inside some Apple buildings. I know you're never going to say anything, but did you think that the lab that they went to was a real lab, or was that a set? Did you see that part?
I mean, my guess is that it's all a hybrid. Like the amount of meticulousness that went into that, I think is a level. Especially think about they've had months, right, to get this right since they have announced that it was going to go remote. You just need to assume that with the amount of people that they have and the budget that they have, the amount of different sets that they probably had prior to settling on any one of those, and the look and feel, these were conversations that were being had on a daily basis every single day with lots of people for months. And so in order to arrive at that, they're also finding ways to leverage all of their different departments and various technologies into how these things go together. So the short answer is it's a conversation at a level that I think very few of us would ever be a part of in our day-to-day corporate lives.
Yeah. I couldn't help but think that some of the stuff with Craig, there was something about it. It just felt like a virtual set to me. But
I'm positive that's going to be like I'm sure it's partial You know, that's the thing. I doubt it would be full, like they're going to use elements and sort of incorporate. I think we're entering a world of a hybrid approach to all of this, would be my opinion.
Yeah. All right.
Only
So
thing-
who?
There's just
Go
one
ahead.
thing that bothers a little bit still, but I
Yeah.
do understand that we are showing screens and demos, so it makes sense. That is the high frame rate. The high frame rate does bother a little bit when watching just people talking and the camera moving to the sides all the time. The high frame rate, for me, it bothers a little bit.
You know what? I watched it in the living room on the 85-inch, 65. I don't know. Is it? We have a big old Samsung on the wall through Apple TV, and It never occurred to me that it was high frame rate. It seemed natural to me. Maybe is it possible I wasn't getting it at the same frame rate?
I think the more thought-provoking question is, do you all feel that the set was worth the amount of money that was probably spent on it?
Well, first, I mean, I think there's a high degree of likelihood that everything but the lab stuff was actually shot at the Steve Jobs Theater, okay? And the garage shot with the car. But it felt, on occasion, it felt like it could have been faked. I thought that the very first shot of Tim with the Steadicam that walked around and then settled with the empty theater behind him, I thought that was perfectly chosen. It absolutely tells the entire story. I'm here alone. I wish you guys were filling these seats. And I thought the direction behind that was kind of touching, actually. And then I gotta say, I love the first shot when you're going through the door and you see the Steve Jobs Theater name. I mean, I always get a little choked up when I see that, or you see portraits of Steve around the campus or whatever.
And in all of the shots, they embrace the emptiness of the place, showing the architecture of everything that they built throughout these years. And even where you would have more people, which was the lab with 3 people there, they're all behind glasses, right? So each one is in a different room with glasses in between. So I found that, creatively speaking, very nice to explore the architecture and the emptiness of the place.
Even the emptiness of the parking lot when they did the BMW shot. I mean, that's I don't know if you've ever been there, but that's a giant parking lot. It's enormous. It's really big, and that was one car in the whole place. Anyway, let's move on. It was a good. I think we all agree it was a good production, and I would also like to say one last thing. It'd be interesting to do a word count, the number of words shared in that 2-hour presentation versus the number of words shared in a normal keynote, because it felt more dense to me, and without applause shots and stuff, quite possibly it was.
Well, this is the age of masterclass, so I totally agree with you.
What do you mean by that, Jace?
Well, I mean, listening to you guys riff, and sorry for interrupting your transition.
No, you're fine.
Like, this is the age of masterclass, right? Where we're being just pelted with online education left and right. And I use that as my bar, right? When looking at information, whether it be conferences or education purposes. And I feel like Apple specifically wanted to rise to that level of production value as well as education, because, even though this was the keynote, this in fact is an education conference, and it's really taking that mantle and it's really running with it. And that's what I took away from it.
Yeah, I think it really is, it does become about education. All right, let's talk about some tech. So who wants an ARM chip in their Mac? Yes, anyone? We'll
see you in 6 months.
Was there any surprises there? I don't think so.
My surprise was how fast the process was advanced already into the ARM transition and being prepared. The fact that by the end of the year, we're going to be seeing iOS and iPadOS applications coming to the Mac. It's a lot faster than I expected.
Really?
Well, I think one of the things that kind of seemed surprising was, if the demo was to be believed, then they're running on the exact same chip that's in the current iPad Pro. If that's the case, for 3 streams of 4K is pretty mediocre today, but on that chip, that's pretty decent. And
I think I missed
and running
that
the 6K
point.
display. And running the 6K display.
Correct. And that's why I'm not 100% sure that when they splashed up the about screen that, the implication is it's the same machine that the developers get as a Mac Mini. It may be augmented beyond that we don't know. But anyway, that was the implication.
Peter.
Yeah, I'm back. I think that got lost because you remember at the last WWDC, I was sat in the audience when they played on the Mac Pro 3 streams of 8K ProRes RAW and stuff like that, and we've all seen that kind of multicam playback, which is amazing. But basically, what you saw yesterday was 3 4K streams playing back on an iPad Pro with a chip, and it didn't sound that impressive because we've had a lot bigger. But actually, in the context of it being coming off the chip that's in the iPad Pro, that is huge news. That is really, huge news. I think that got a lot. It got a bit lost in the presentation.
Yeah, I think it's. Go ahead. Sorry. Go, Robin.
Sorry. Is it? Have we people who use Luma, the iPad editing software?
LumaFusion.
Have they been able to play more than? Yeah. LumaFusion. Okay. Well, have they been able to play more than one stream of 4K H.264, H.265? Okay, 3.
Yeah, 3.
So
I'm not sure about the 4th, but yeah.
Okay, but I mean, if the tech as it was able to play 4K H.265, that was my impression as I was watching. Oh, all right, they were able to play 4K until they said it's 4K ProRes, and I was thinking, oh my God, the bandwidth that must be going through the ports must be crazy. And if we're talking about silicon, we don't quite know whether if the display is being driven through the 6K display is being driven through the USB-C. What does that say about Thunderbolt?
Well, I think, that's the big question, right? So Intel, makes Thunderbolt, right? So now we're going to an ARM world. The question we've all got to ask ourselves is, it's obvious why Apple's doing this, because they like to control the whole widget and they want to beginning to end. And it's the reason you see such good video performance in Final Cut versus Adobe, because literally the Final Cut team is optimizing with the Mac team to do performance-based things, where even though it's on a lighter setup than many PCs are, because it's an integrated solution. Now the question becomes, when these chips all happen, I think like any initial Apple product release, you're going to have some pluses and some minuses, and also you're going to have to ask yourselves which peripherals are now spec'd out appropriately for the silicon that's in there, and how are things like Thunderbolt and other things that Apple has put a lot of investment in over the years going to impact the new Macs that are coming out. But I think where Apple is clearly trying to go is to create a device for a specific use case. So the iPhone and watch are going to be for specific types of things, the same with the iPad, all the way up the Mac line. And since they're doing their own silicon type top to bottom, you're going to be able to see consistent performance and really spec out from beginning to end. Whatever device you're using, it'll probably be comparable results across the ecosystem, and I think that's probably where they want to be headed, and I think probably why they're doing this.
Well, isn't there also discussion of a USB 4 standard being just around the corner?
And Thunderbolt 4.
Yeah, so
which is supposed to be
synonymous.
synonymous.
It's hard to say what a machine in 6 months is going to be configured like, and assuming that they start with low-end machines first, a replacement for the MacBook Air, the Mini, then Thunderbolt may be irrelevant at this point in time. Another year, that's a different story.
Do you think they're going to start with the low-end machines first or the high-end machines? Because there's logic both ways.
Yeah, but you can't start with the high-end machines. I mean, realistically, if somebody just bought a Mac Pro and spent 10 grand or 50 grand or whatever.
I'm not saying they wouldn't be upset, Peter or Oliver.
Yeah, well, right. But remember, they left the conference saying there will be more Intel machines coming in the pipeline.
But what about the concept of, like, say, with the phones? When they come out with a new phone, what was really cool yesterday is now the entry-level phone.
Well,
I don't know.
clearly that's part of what I think they're trying to get to,
Yeah.
at least in terms of we can now control the silicon, therefore we can control the release schedule.
Felipe, you look like you're going to jump out of the screen.
Yeah, no, because there are so many things that maybe we're skipping here. Is that
Okay.
it's not going to be from black to white, the transition. It's not going to be from Intel to ARM and period, there we go. There is one computer that has been phased out, and that's probably the one that's going to come back to, which is the MacBook. So that's going to be probably full ARM coming back.
Oh,
We're
I
probably
thought you were
gonna
going to
see
mention
Mac
the
Mini.
cube. I thought you...
But then on the higher end, there are other things that they probably can be thinking about or already thinking about, is that you don't necessarily need to be either ARM or Intel. You can have a hybrid system that has both of them. So instead of using emulation to run one code or the other code, if you open an ARM application, you open through the ARM processor and the other one through the Intel. Those things are possible. And the other thing that we need to think about is these chips, they have very high performance under very strict power and thermal conditions. Remove power and thermal conditions on a Pro machine like an iMac Pro or a Mac Pro, and what do we have? We can multiply the amount of chips that we have inside with a zillion cores that can take more energy, and the thermals are more easily dissipated. So there are a lot of things to consider as well here.
I was
So
a little confused
Go ahead, Peter.
in terms
Oliver.
of GPU. That there was a GPU mentioned, but no specific GPU hardware. So what does that do to AMD?
I don't know. Wouldn't it be awful if Apple... It seems like the current line of thinking is more GPUs better, bigger GPUs better. I think if they tried to take on the GPU market also, would that... I can't imagine that'd be smart.
Well, if you have a Mac Mini, you have the integrated Intel GPU. So is
Yeah,
the
that's a
ARM
good point.
chip going to do the same thing?
I think the other question is, what's the use case for the GPU? Because in terms of how we're now looking at computing, we've always looked at it like bigger device is better. But really, at a certain point, there's a combination of CPU, GPU, RAM, and all of these other things, and hard drive speed that's going to dictate where performance is. So my guess is Apple is looking at all of these metrics and deciding, price, performance, and size of the device, where they're going to compensate in a variety of directions, which is why having your own silicon and some of these things allows you to do more to adapt to the device's form factor and intended use case, which is, I think, probably how they're looking at it. And GPUs may be less or more important depending on the device they've got out.
Peter?
I think the GPU question was a big puzzle, because I was expecting them to say something about GPUs, because as we know, Final Cut and other NLEs use the GPU an awful lot now for image processing. So I kind of feel like they left it out deliberately, because who knows, they're probably still in development as well. But we've got to bear in mind that last week or the week before, they announced the GPU update on the MacBook Pro, which gives a 75% increase over the 4 gig model, which is pretty beefy. If you're doing a lot of stuff and encoding and everything, that's quite a jump. And I was hovering over the buy button. I was really hovering over the buy button, and thinking, well, no, WWDC's kind of a week away. Stupid, you're not going to buy something the week before WWDC. I nearly did, but no. And lo and behold, this comes out, and now, I can understand your thought, Chris, of saying buy the machine you need when you need it, but $4,000 is a lot of money to buy a machine that is
okay.
The sun has just started to set on.
Okay, so this is a common thing, and it kind of irritates me every time it comes up, but I get it. Computers, contrary to modern popular belief, computers do not become obsolete. They don't. What happens is our expectations of what we want that computer to do changes. I was on a conference call with a guy today on a trash can Mac Pro with a cinema display, and he didn't have a camera. He goes, "Sorry, I don't have a camera." It doesn't mean his his computer is obsolete, he's still working on it. He's still doing a lot of work. He showed me screen sharing, him working on it. But
the thing
just
is,
because so our expectations of what we want. So the point about buying what you need when you need it, if you need a 4,000 quid computer, look what I did there, quid, then you get it. And it's not the last computer you're going to buy. In 3 years or whatever, you're going to buy another one, and whatever is available then is what you'll buy. You might not feel cool when you don't have an ARM chip in your computer, but you'll still be getting work done and getting paid, right?
Well, but I think the issue though becomes what's the longevity of that machine, because if the machine at some point becomes obsolete enough that you can't run the software you want, then it's a bad investment.
But again, your expectations changed. It still runs all the software that was around when you bought it.
Right.
Exactly.
Well, sure, but you expect a machine that's expensive to get you some mileage. So if you
I expect the computer I buy to do.
But that's expectations. Those are expectations. And for example, with Big Sur, it's going to be running from machines from 2013, machines that are 7 years old.
I think Big Sur only works on the ARM machines. Isn't that true?
No, it's not.
That was a segue. That was a segue.
But there's one thing that we can key on right now today that amplifies the argument of today's computers versus yesterday's computers, and we can use Final Cut Pro as that example, right? Looking at the iMac Pro, you're given specific advantages of being able to do VR editing because you can hook up a VR headset to it, right? I mean, so there is an argument to be made that depending on what we do for a living, which we're storytellers, we're creators, that certain software packages, I guarantee you, will not be available unless you're operating on an ARM computer. And we can just use past precedent to indicate that.
I think the last big transition they did, and they mentioned it in the keynote, the transition to OS 10, the transition from PowerPC to Intel. When I started hearing the first rumblings about the transition to ARM, all I could think of was there's going to be a couple years of headaches. I mean,
fair.
But the transition started. The transition started as soon as they developed
I don't
Swift
have a headache yet.
Made it open source.
Well, I think if you look back though historically at the PowerPC, if you bought the last PowerPC, you basically were end of life the minute you bought it. If you bought the earliest Mac Pro that was running on Intel, that was a machine that didn't have a lot of life to it because it was about mid 2009 that you got the machines that everybody's still running today, if they're still running the old cheese graters. So that's part of the thing to look at. But I think what's different here is at that point, that was a brand new thing. Apple's already several years into running ARM chips. So I think they have a better idea. So coming out of the gate, I think those machines are going to be better to start with than the equivalent transition, in 2006 or whenever.
And the code is there.
Peter, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I mean, I wrote yesterday before the presentation. I just hope they learnt from Final Cut's, disaster launch where they turned it off overnight. And I'm just sat there going, they're going to say something, aren't they? And they did. They went to great lengths to make sure that this thing was going to be, have a segue. What was Steve Martin's word? Is a phrase, a dissolve rather than a cut, he said, didn't he? Famously. And you can see, I mean, first of all, for me, there's a lot of questions that come up because you're saying, well, they're going to release Intel machines. They've got Intel machines to release. I mean, but people are going to buy them. But I mean, you know that at some point, let's say, what's the average life of a laptop? 4 years, 5 years? Well, having said that, if Tim Rahman spills his tea over it, it's kind of like a lot shorter. But
Tim, you've been quiet. What's the next computer you're going to buy?
Well, I'm happy with my 2012-year-old MacBook Pro, and this does the job. On a professional point of view, it's more so the whole virtualization element I'm interested about. see where that goes with Apple and their OS.
Yeah,
But
I think for me, having Malcolm and Tim on here is interesting because we've never talked about virtualization of the NLEs. You know, people have talked to, you know, there are things that you can use out there that, you know, screen sharing and virtualization of, you know, Premiere, for example, and Avid. But yesterday was the first time they've mentioned virtualization. And I think, Tim, you pinged me a link last night, didn't you? But with some of the developer stuff that they've already published. And I think looking forward, they've got to be able to allow you to virtualize a Mac. But is it just Mac OS and Linux, or I mean, I didn't see any Windows.
Docker support as well. No Windows, which begs the question: are they going to drop Boot Camp? Who knows? But yeah, them talking about it is big in my opinion, because it's something that's not been mentioned. I think Malcolm can add to that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're already running virtual editing for a lot of our clients, and you know, you're looking at just how much you can take your real estate, move it to different clients. You can, you know, spin things up, spin things down. I mean, it gives you a lot of options. And obviously, I mean, from Apple's perspective, if they can sell tin many times over to the same customer, that's brilliant. But if they're thinking about virtualizing, then that's a slightly different scenario. So it'd be interesting to see where they're going with that, because, you know, I have a Mac. I've loved Macs all my life. I think they're great, but I'm not going to keep buying over and over and over again every time. And especially from an editing perspective, if I've got a virtual environment, I want to work out how I can use that to the best advantage for the company I work for. So it's, you know, how does that integrate for different client sites, for example? You know, how do I do Active Directory integration? You know, all these conversations need to be kind of played through to understand kind of where they're going with this.
Well, I wonder if that's kind of a nod to the data center folks, you know, the folks that have been the Mac Mini clients on the high-end level.
So if they're going to virtualize, that means I would be able to have a remote server, be able to fire Final Cut Pro 10 up, or any app that will work on a Mac, and then use it remotely, I would imagine. And up till now, we haven't been able to do that.
Well, here's the question.
Legally.
So here's a question for everybody. Does anyone feel like Apple solved any of their existing problems yesterday?
I think they paved the way for a lot of new ones. I'm just gonna be honest. That's what I was. That's what I said when I was like, transition. I don't want to do a transition. I want to just make what I currently have be even more solid and maybe work a little faster. And I realize, you know, advancement takes pain, and you know, I think we began to experience it last year at the Creative Summit, Final Cut Creative Summit, when the audience was very disappointed that Apple didn't have anything really cool to show us back in November. And now I get it. You know, they've been working on that cool new icon for the new Final Cut, and they've been, you know, making the code work on an ARM processor.
Well, sorry, go ahead.
No, go.
The one thing I want to just talk about real quick, just taking your point and running with it, right? You know, what problems do they solve, right? Well, the one thing that really stuck out to me was the things they didn't say, right? Don't forget, this is WWDC, Worldwide Developer Conference, and there wasn't a lot of discussion about the code base itself, right? Out of all the WWDCs over the last 5 years, they didn't talk about Swift a lot, or Swift UI. It was just in the background as a thing. Now, if any of you develop, which I'm sure a lot of you do, like not having to go into your apps and change those code bases, especially for these pro apps that are coming out, is monumental. It's huge, right? Because every time iOS 13, you know, or let's start with 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, you've literally had to rebuild your whole entire code base from the ground up to make sure it actually run on these new devices, on these new iOS operating systems. Well, from what I dove into yesterday, looking at, you know, the updates to Swift UI and what was happening on, you know, Xcode 12, I mean, there's not a lot of changing, right? So coming back to, you know, where you were at your point, what I'm excited about is all these developers now have a level playing field, right? You don't have to be a big studio to develop Mac apps, in the future. You can be one of you individually can make a very powerful app that will translate to iPad, to watch, to it technically is iOS, but your phone, but as well as your Mac. So there's nothing stopping from, these entry-level developers from creating a real business for themselves. And that's what I'm really excited about.
Is that to imply that making a phone app is not a real business, Jace? I'm sorry.
No. It's just what I'm trying to say, right, is it's really, really, really hard to make an app. And I'm not trying to trivialize that whatsoever.
Of course.
Okay. But we're now in an age where we're almost at what you see is what you get. What Dreamweaver taught us, as people that build things and our expectations of how, an IDE should work, right? That's now really getting close to being achievable, right? To be able to drag and drop software elements into your app and then connect it, code. The code is slowly over time diminishing and becoming, obviously that I'm trivializing this, but it's becoming less invasive. And the point I just want to reiterate is the playing field is just leveling across the board, and it's allowing creators to not just be video editors, to not just be, writers, to focus on whatever discipline that they're really good at. You're now getting closer and closer and closer to being able to do all of it.
So we have a question that has come in. Roscoe Jones says, what is the most advanced development that is Final Cut Pro specific that you see out there? Will it continue to be do you think it'll continue to be supported? Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think all of these things are just steps toward faster. I really do believe that Apple at its core has a fundamental need to advance the creative process. And they like the fact that they make tools that are used by creatives. And I don't think that's going to go away. I could be wrong. I don't think so.
So just like running off of what I just said a second ago, because I love that question. I think it's an amazing question. Is that yesterday, and reaffirming what you're saying, Chris, is yesterday was about removing barriers, right? And I don't know if you've ever used the iMovie app on the iPad, but I've started playing with it just because I'm, a nerd just like all of you, and I wanted to see what its capabilities are. With the new keyboard on the iPad Pro, using iMovie is an absolute joy. It's an absolute joy. It's great. And it's that you're able to turn out really quick edits that, as all of you know, can translate into the Final Cut environment if you want to, if you choose to. I can just take those edits and transfer them over. Well, what I saw yesterday was a big flag being planted in the ground and saying, that, hey, we see you, we care about you, and we're going to take these pro app experiences and we're going to make them readily available on everything. So when I look at that announcement yesterday, I see Final Cut Pro on the iPad. It may not be this year, it may not be next year, but I see that happening because of yesterday's announcement, and I'm incredibly excited about it. Because once again, going back to my previous point, and I'm sorry for talking, is now that app developers have the ability to do these creative experiences with code, you're only enabling Final Cut Pro extensions to become more robust, more achievable, and you're going to start seeing a powerhouse of apps coming out of the community within the next 2 years.
One quick question.
Yeah.
Do you think we're going to see Final Cut come to the iPad, or are we seeing the iPad through ARM come to Final Cut?
I think it's both.
Yeah,
I think it's both. It's a little bit of both, because when you look at iPadOS is getting closer and closer in terms of features to what you can do on macOS. When you look at the UI of macOS, if you use a Mac and an iPad on a day-to-day basis, they are so similar right now on iPadOS 14 and Big Sur. The fact that Spotlight on the iPad finally looks like Spotlight on macOS. Finder, actually, they upgraded the UI on Files for iPadOS, and that same UI is the Neo UI for Finder. It's interesting. So I think it's both. I think it's iPad going towards macOS, and Final Cut coming towards the iPad.
Robin,
I was going to say, kind of like
Go ahead.
What
Oliver.
prevents us from seeing an iPad Pro running Mac OS since they're virtually that close? And doesn't that then become the vehicle to put Final Cut Pro on the iPad? I mean,
Nothing
yeah, like that.
Nothing other than the touch, because then you have to design a UI for touch as well. I think so. Maybe iPad OS will literally be the touch interface of Mac OS at some
Robin?
point.
Yeah, I was thinking completely left field. I mean, what's stopping them to install the Mac? Seeing as the code base is merging, that's what we're basically seeing, right? A design language that is unified now, that we can see on the desktop and the iPad, basically seamless. The question becomes, with the new keyboard that they just released, what stops them from saying, well, you can install a Mac OS on the iPad, or you can install an iPad OS on your iPad?
Just like Microsoft did with their Windows. They had a Windows version that was the basic version, and then you could upgrade it, and it was for their ARM processor, and then you could upgrade to the normal Windows and unlock all of the advanced features. That would be interesting.
I think for me,
I think we're gonna
as well. The merging of the two softwares, or whatever you want to call it, is interesting because look, Chris and I, when we're waiting for stuff to happen, we play around with Snap Camera all the time, and bits and pieces like that. And there's all the tracking that you get on an iPhone and everything like that. Hopefully, all that's going to just be able to be ported over to run in the OS. So all the stuff that you've got, and all the machine learning and everything, and all the AR, everything that you've got, that's all been developed for the phone, hopefully will come to the Mac. Now, I know that Felipe knows, because he is running Big Sur now, so he is always months ahead of us.
Felipe is in the future, but before we go to the future, one quick second. I think that the thing that interests me the most is, I know for a fact, and I can't tell you why, that there are things that you can do on your phone that you can't do in Final Cut.
Yeah.
And it has to do with the iOS, and it has to do with the fact that, it's pinging the cloud all the time. And so I don't know which one you're pointing to.
Felipe.
But so the fact that they're coming together, I think it's going to open up a lot of search capabilities, image recognition, AI type stuff. And I hate saying the word AI, but whatever. Felipe, jump out of your screen again. What do you have to say?
Okay. Everyone, you guys have to watch the State of the Union of the OSs, because there they did the demos that Chris is talking about right now. Basically, they did a comparison between an Intel chip and a Apple Silicon chip using the Neural Engine to do object recognition on video. So they ran an app that was recognizing objects on a video, and it was analyzing the whole video and putting what object is where between each part of the video, which in between the time code.
Range-based keywords?
Yes, a lot faster than Intel chip. So that's like a big advantage, but I have to watch it again. I think that was an unnamed application. It was just an example. And if Alex Conner would be here, he would probably be talking about the patents they have for exactly that thing that we would like to see it on Final Cut. Object recognition, having those keywords made out for us, so we would see our car passing on screen. So there is a car. So there's objects.
My phone does that already. That already, and it drives me
but
nuts.
That's not only iOS. That's not only iOS. That's the silicon. Yeah. Because you need a lot of processing for that.
I can open up my Photos app and just search randomly for the word bridge or dog. Apparently, there's like 2,000 words that it just automatically is indexing for. Creepy, maybe. But I say dog, and I can find a video clip that's on my phone, that I shot on my phone, obviously, that doesn't start with a shot of the dog, but it's like, the backyard. And then all of a sudden, boop, 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 dog runs through. It's like, how does it do that, and why can't my Final Cut do that? Peter.
I was pretty amazed one day when I opened up photos on my phone, and it gave me a presentation of my cat pictures to music.
Yeah.
And this is yeah, we've had it, haven't we? Your furry friends photos or whatever, furry friends.
I have that of my dogs.
Yeah. So it recognized my cat in all the photos and then put it to music. And that's where I think you've got Final Cut, which is this amazing framework where you're going to have stuff thrown at it that's extra. So you're going to have a lot of processing that's going to be able to work with it, because why not? You know, people, on forums, how many times you say, I want to create a slideshow? You know, I need to create a slideshow. I've got 400 pics. How do I do it? What's the quickest way to do it? Well,
put it in your phone.
Put it on your phone, yeah. But why couldn't you have that type of being able to build stuff in Final Cut?
We will, yeah. And I think that the trick to it is when the OSs merge more, because I think it's mostly that.
Yeah, I'm really excited because yes, we're going to have new chips, and yes, they're going to go faster, use less battery, be cheaper, etc. But all the stuff that you can do on your phone should be coming to be maybe able to, you can use it in an NLE, and to be able to get all your pictures, pick ones you like, and say, well, range-based, not range-based, but keywords, say all the pictures of my cat or wife or whatever. Yeah. I've got my anniversary coming up. I want to make a slideshow. Hit the button and it'll do it.
When I go on a corporate event and I'm doing, you know, a fast turnaround edit, I want to be able to feed it the headshots of all the executives for the company, and then that way when the producer comes in and goes, do we have any shots of the CEO? I go, I don't know, but Final Cut should be able to find it for me because it has facial recognition. Here's a concept that I think is important to at least think about. This is going to put Apple so far ahead of somebody who just writes software, like say Adobe. They're literally going to control every aspect of the production pipeline if you're willing to shoot all on iOS devices. At what point, how long is it going to take before somebody tries to sue them? When's the first lawsuit come for, like, basically antitrust? Like they're going to be so far ahead of anybody else that nobody's going to be able to compete with them.
Well,
what do you think?
You say that they showed the auto reframing, didn't they? Which obviously is actually in Premiere at the moment. So
right,
that, you know, you've got that, and they if you think about the things that Apple have borrowed, like the flow cut or morph cut or whatever you want to call it, you know, that was from the Adobe technology presentation that they did. I mean, I'm not really worried about that. I mean,
that's just one feature in an app, though. I'm talking about
let the lawyers sort that out. And the big one they've got is the recording of ProRes RAW in camera. That's the big one that they've got. I mean, Robin, you'll probably be able to kind of rattle on about that. But they lost the first case of that, I believe, to
also Chris. One thing I think you have to understand too is there's never going to be that lawsuit because their market share in any one category is not big enough, and you're underestimating the fact of how cheap people are. Apple's never going to price a product to the absolute lowest common denominator. So there's always going to be cheaper products that are attempting to rip off the larger ecosystem.
That argument makes perfect sense.
Well, the closest you've got to that argument is the App Store lawsuits.
Yes. I was gonna chime in on that, Oliver, at the very beginning. You know, one of the things that was missed about there being an in-person conference was there was no protesters there about this. I mean, don't for a second, you know, think this isn't a big deal. Like, this is a big deal. You know, the rev share that they're taking from developers, you know, I don't really mind, you know, but for someone that is, you know, just a single developer, this is how they make their living. I mean, this is going to set some major precedent within our industry.
But can't they just, to take Sam's argument, can't they just say, well, I'll just go develop for Android instead?
Yeah, but the actual precedent, hold on. The actual precedent is before the App Store, you had to either sell it by yourself or go to one of those markets like you guys there have the ISPs that would take 50, 60% of the cut. And you wouldn't have the guarantee and the trust that from those companies, you wouldn't have the curation of the code itself that's not going to have malware, that's not going to have virus. So the precedent is that. And then there is the part of, okay, you're not dealing with credit card. You don't need to sign up for a credit card service. And if you're distributing it for free, you're paying just your $99 a year Apple developer subscription. But there's just one more thing, which is what Chris just said. Nothing stops a developer from developing for other platforms. It's a choice. You're getting to a business agreement. Yeah,
so I'll agree with everything you said minus one thing, and I think it just tanks your entire argument, which is there isn't the ability to distribute an app unless you go through the App Store. All right. If there was an alternative I could distribute it to, right, that wasn't curated, that didn't offer some of the things that you're talking about, which by the way is possible. It was just
the alternative is Android though.
But you're completely just avoiding a consumer base. You're saying, hey, you're not good to come develop on our platform, so just go.
But by Sam's argument, Apple's consumer base isn't big enough to be a monopoly.
But hold on, yeah, there's the other thing too. Apple is like a supermarket, right? Right? I mean, if you want your product to go into that supermarket, you're gonna have to obey some of the regulations of that supermarket. Let's say that's Walgreens, I don't know, and you need to have certain things that you have to go through in order to make that product that you want to sell available at Walgreens. Is the same thing. Is if Apple would have been a public company, not a public company as in IPO type of thing and having shares, but a company like state-owned that you have the right to have the access to it, I would say, yeah, probably it should be completely different. But you're handshaking with them. Okay, I have a business, you have a business. I want to be part of your client bases. And
I'm starting to be sorry I brought up this legal thing.
Oh, this is actually a worthwhile. This is a good
all
discussion.
this crap out, Peter.
I'm gonna look. This is important though, because I think what we're really getting to, like, we see this with a lot of big tech companies. I mean, like, how can you simultaneously have Apple, Google, and Amazon simultaneously running the world unless they actually are together? And the question is, which platform is actually the dominant one at this point? And they're all competing with each other with the same identical services and going about it in different ways. And the question is, whose tech company world do you want to live in, or do you want to live in any of these tech companies' worlds? And also in many situations, what you see a lot of these tech companies doing is they're trying to decide, because the other thing is, you talk about a lawsuit, whose lawsuit? Is it going to be the US's lawsuit, China's lawsuit? Which government's lawsuit would actually
anybody
be more
who's
powerful?
trying to I think it's going to be, if it were to happen, and let's move on, but if it were to happen, it'd be somebody trying to compete with Apple and being frustrated that their NLE is not as fast because maybe Apple doesn't share everything with Adobe to make it faster. I don't know.
But that kind of is a weird argument, because Blackmagic has been able to get their code up to be rendering faster than the current release of Final Cut 10. So
that sounds like a conspiracy.
And it doesn't need to go through the App Store either.
Well, I'm just saying, I mean, if there are a bunch of talented coders out there that can really dig in deep into the code base, I'm sure they're able to do it.
Well, so can I just go slightly on from saying about that with the App Store? Do you think that possibly there is going to be a Final Cut App Store or a Pro Apps App Store? No. Because
I think there should be. Personally.
I agree.
Why would I have another thing to launch to go find,
or at least a section?
So I'm going to shoot myself in the foot, and Felipe is going to love it, and I'm just going to admit it. I'm just going to admit it right now, because I'm going to say something completely hypocritical, and I just need to own it, right? Which is, So we're all capable of probably playing with motion, creating our own things, but like there's a lot of times where we're trying to do these quick turnaround edits where we go to these sites, right? And we find something that, that could work. But the quality just lets you down every time. Like every time. I'm not going to mention a specific site, but there's a site that lets me down 100% of the time. And I keep on coming back and I'm like, you're going to save me. And it never does. And I end up doing it myself. And for something like this, right, where it's an art-driven medium, where we're putting forward the best quality of work we possibly can. Yes, Felipe, I'm a hypocrite. Is that you do need that control. You do need someone saying that this is good enough, and like I just shot my entire argument in the face. But I have to own it. But that's the truth. That's how I feel about it.
Let's talk about Big Sur. Felipe's muted, so you're not going to screw up my segue. Let's talk about Big Sur. So Felipe, you installed it in the last 24 hours. Is that correct?
Not only installed it, but I'm running it right now with Sidecar on the iPad on iPadOS 14 on this Zoom call.
So let me ask you a question.
Mini.
Is the opacity of the menu just exactly what you want it to be? Are the curves on the corners exactly the way you want it?
Look,
I always laugh when they demo a new OS because most of it is it's like, I don't care. I don't care how dark it gets or how curvy it is. Peter?
Yeah.
I found obviously when they flashed up the screen of all the apps and everybody hit, screen grab and then kind of like went into the analysis afterwards, like everybody did, and saw the new icons. I mean, what was interesting for me, really, if you think about the design over the last few years, it's all been a flat thing. So it's all been minimal colors, flat. And lo and behold, the icons, they've all got drop shadows on elements.
Yeah.
And it's all coming back to the skeuomorphism. So give it a couple more iterations of the OS.
I wouldn't say it's skeuomorphic yet. No, it's a long way from that.
That's because Johnny's out of the company.
Yeah. And the notepad will have that leather strap across the top again.
Did it really?
With the page that rips off.
Oh, crap. I'm sorry.
But it's just interesting. I think with also going dark as well with the OS, following the trends. What Apple tends to do with things like the icons and everything, everyone else tends to follow. And you saw the Microsoft ones all had the drop shadows on the bits. So for me, that the actual design of that was quite interesting because certainly for the trend over the last 4 years or so has been completely flat.
Felipe, have you tried to edit at all in it yet?
I opened a couple of projects, but not Rio edit. I wanted to make sure that a couple of things would still open because I am testing a lot of applications. I need to let the developers know these are the things that we are running with this new beta. So by the time that it's released on day one, everything is running well. But what I liked about the whole macOS and iPad and iOS things is that they fixed one thing that everyone has been complaining about, which is, there's no new UI, there's nothing new, it looks the same. So underneath, they have been working on a lot of things to change the OS, but it's not visually different, so people tend to complain about that. So that is there, and they didn't put a lot of new actual features. So what I'm hoping is that this is fine-tuning Catalina, making it better. And with this beta 1, honestly, I have run beta 1s of macOS for the past 5 or 6 years. This has been the most stable one that I have ever seen. No crashes.
Were you kind of shocked that you were able to get everything up to do this show today on it?
I'm actually surprised that the ATEM software, there was no problem installing and running the extensions. I was surprised that running Zoom was no problem. I was surprised that all of the applications that I downloaded so far, with exception for Google Drive File Stream and Backup and Sync from Google, those two, they did not run at all, which brings up some questions. But everything else has been running, and that kind
of goes with one of the questions that's coming in. Roscoe Jones says, Apple can do amazing things, but I think third-party developers are necessary to the continued growth of Final Cut. Oh, yeah. What is the best news for them from WWDC, and is is it all the tech that Apple will be adding under the hood, i.e. the OS, that is going to help Final Cut?
I think that's where the App Store for Pro Apps comes in place, because I think the extensions is a very big start of that. Is okay, now you can bring in your application UI within Final Cut, so you don't have to get out. I think they're gonna keep on opening that, and I hope it's gonna get better and better, and there will be more and more people. Imagine you want, like Jace was talking about, oh, you go to this or that plugin manufacturer for graphics, and if you can access all of their catalog within Final Cut and just say, use this one, and you just drag directly from not owning to your timeline, and all the credit card transaction happens in the background because it's already saved. For me, that would be huge, because it would stay, it would not be on your way of being creative. So you would have this huge access to, let's say, FX Factory. If FX Factory would be there, and you could just drag and drop things from within the extension.
When the workflow extensions first came out, I went, why not have a FX Factory workflow extension to be able to show off your stuff, and not exactly drag. It'd be great if you could drag a trial from the workflow extension in, and it would, be watermarked, and then hit the buy button and everything like that. That's a bit too far. But I mean, the argument was, well, what's it going to bring? That was the argument. It's a loss of development. Well, what's it going to bring?
I think it's the same benefit as a store accepting, or a restaurant accepting credit card. Because if you only accept cash, you come with to the restaurant with $50, and then by the time that you get to 40 something, and you're like, oh, I have to stop consuming because I don't have any more cash. But if they accept credit cards, then at that point you're like, oh, let's drink another bottle of wine, let's drink a few more beers, and then your bill just gets bigger and bigger. If it's as easy to buy something within Final Cut, and then you really need that at that moment, and you can see it right there instead of having to go Google and search for it. I think it's an advantage big enough.
I think that already exists, isn't it? I mean, with the stock footage companies and the stock music companies, they've already invested in extensions both in Premiere and in
Final
Cut.
And Simon Says as well with transcription, make transcription so easy. So why not just use it, right?
So talking of plugins, I take it everybody spotted the favorites in the bar. Yeah.
The category favorites that you can name it yourself.
Well, in the screenshot of Final Cut Pro 10, there were two things that I spotted. Well, I didn't spot the favorites, and somebody put that on Twitter, which was great. So you can actually make your favorites effects into favorites now, or will be able to. And secondly, there was a mysterious arrow on the top of the, the front and go back and forward arrows for the timeline.
Yeah.
The history. There was an arrow pointing down. So I think because look, those arrows on either side I don't know what they do. They go forward sometimes, they go backwards sometimes. You think you're going to go back to the last one, and it goes back wherever it thought.
That is not my experience at all. That's not my experience at all. I think there's times when I forget which timeline I'm on.
Yeah.
No, I think they go forward and backward. And if you click and hold on it, a menu drops down. You know that, right?
Yeah. But there was a little arrow there, but apart from that, the GUI, I didn't see anything else.
Jace.
I didn't recognize.
So Felipe keyed on something that gets me so incredibly excited, which I want to just talk on real quick. Sam's probably tired of hearing me talk about it because I talk Zero Alpha about it all the time, which is we're in the age of curation. We all know that, right? We go to YouTube curating videos, right? OTT apps like, Apple TV Plus curating content, etc. Well, we're at this really key, point in the human development process of how we consume technology, consume videos, consume everything. And right now we're at that key principle being, we're going to start curating APIs. And what I mean by that is going to Felipe's example is being able to drag and drop, whether it be an effect onto the timeline or stock footage onto the timeline. Well, we're going to, at some point, start dragging APIs onto the timeline saying, okay, look, I want to focus on this e-commerce site, or I want to focus on this multiple choice answer, or focus on this redirect, okay, that I want my video to direct consumers to have them interact with that content or purchase content. right? Well, TikTok's doing that right now with their shop button. Instagram's doing it right now with their shop button. We had a show called HQ that was on that was doing Who Wants to Be a Millionaire for, iPhone. Felipe.
Well, that's more or less what Shortcuts is doing without a UI. Shortcuts is just missing the UI part of it. So yeah, because you download an application and then they expose their own actions, and then you can create your own automation based on those applications. And it's just missing the UI right now for you to put buttons and all of that.
So
I love it.
What Felipe just said, and to me, this is I literally have goosebumps on my arms, like high five through the Zoom call. I cannot even express to you how important this is. The shortcuts thing paired with video is the most important thing that Apple has done for video creation ever. Ever, period, end of statement. And the reason why is right now we've consumed content forever flat, linear consumption. The extent of that you could say that, we have choice with VOD, being able to go and choose what we want to watch at a certain time. That's been an evolution of that with OTT over the top. But now being able to curate APIs, the potential to do that with video, that's revolutionary. That changes how we edit. That changes how we consume. That changes everything. And you're going to see talented creators like Felipe, as well as, hybrid coders / video editors start really merging those two processes to, help benefit the next generation of consumers.
So imagine I've never heard of this before, and you want to take me through it.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. I was going to say the same thing. Let's just for the moment, let's just pretend I'm dumb. Hypothetically speaking, let's just pretend I didn't know anything what the hell you just said. Explain that to me like I'm 5 or 105.
I have a friend who's never heard of this before. Who would be interested?
I'm asking for a friend.
Asking for a friend.
So by the way, whenever I go to Creative Summit and you all see the Apple team running away from me, which I know you've seen, this is what I'm talking about. They're like, get away from us. Get away from us. Let's talk about historical shows that we all know how they work, whether they be format or just, how we watch and enjoy them, right? The examples I like to use are Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? I'm from Texas. Is because it's really easy to understand. You just have a finite amount of options, A, B, C, or D, that a contestant can choose from, and whether they get it right or wrong, they proceed to the next answer, right? We know that format. Okay. Who's familiar with the show HQ? It was on the phone. Raise your hand if you're familiar with that show. Okay, no? Okay, well, HQ was an iPhone app that took the Who Wants to Be a Millionaire format, and they would present users with A, B, C, or D question choices, and if you answered it correctly, you got to stay in the game. And it was, presented to over 1 million people at one point. I think their highest rated show ever. They had 1 million concurrent users on the phone at the same time. Live stream, being able to choose whether or not they got the right answer. And they gave away real prizes, and that was monumental because the reason people were like, oh wow, we can do interactive video experiences now. Now I'm going to give you another format, all right? And let's just assume it's a travel format. All right. The reason why I'm choosing travel for this example is I can curate a multitude of different APIs, and I'm going to walk you through what that means. All right. So 3-act break structure.
I gotta get a notepad. Hold on. Yeah, I need paper. Okay.
All right. No, but I'll make this really, really, really easy. All right. There's 3 acts to a typical show generally, right? There's the beginning, middle, and end. All right. So for this particular format, let's assume that we're traveling to a location, we're going to stay somewhere, and we're going to do an adventure when we get there. Okay. We got that? That's 3 acts. That gives me 3 opportunities to curate 3 different APIs. All right. So if I'm traveling somewhere, I'm going to curate a flight API. All right. So if I'm watching something on my iPhone, I can pull up flights. I can pull up, RV sprinter vans. I can pull up whatever I want to travel to that location. I can book that experience. All right. When I get to that location, Act 2, all right, I'm going to stay somewhere. So I can pull up hotel APIs. I can pull up restaurants. I can pull up Ubers to that location, etc. All right. Which brings me to Act 3. What am I going to do when I get there? All right. I'm going to curate hyper localized experiences based on maybe the Yelp API or some other API to be able to book a surfing adventure, book a scuba adventure, book something. All right. And so what Felipe is talking about with these app clips, or imagine having a very lightweight app presented on top of video that's highlighting that experience at that exact time code. Does that make sense?
Yes. And the app clips, for just in case somebody doesn't understand, the app clip was the thing that they showed at the on the thing where you take your phone and you like tap it on a product and all of a sudden it reveals a bunch of information about it. It's kind of an RFID kind of near field computing, whatever, insert alphabet.
So just to take what you said and just condense it even more, it's a 10 megabyte file, all right, where you do not need the app installed on your phone. Okay. Right, that's the most important piece. It's so lightweight, you can still interact with the API. You can still make a call to an external server to either do something, whether it reserve something, purchase something, get something, but you don't need the core app. So for the first time, they're enabling small snippets, like access to an API where you don't have to download anything. And that's revolutionary.
So if I'm sitting at home watching some soap opera and I go, oh, I quite like that sofa, I'd be able to click on something and it would pop up and say it's available from here and it costs X amount. Do you want to buy? If it's programmed in.
Yeah, it's feasible. And something I want to say, and I think Felipe would be the first person to admit this as well as I will, these aren't new ideas. People have had these ideas forever, right?
Yeah,
You've heard about e-commerce forever. It's just now it's achievable. Like the code base has finally arrived.
Yeah, my Media 100 20 some odd years ago had a feature where I could draw a hotspot on the screen, and if I was playing it back in the QuickTime 7 or 6, whatever it was then, player, it would recognize the mouse and it would launch a URL for me. That was 22 years ago.
Had the sprite track, didn't it? Yeah.
Yep. Sprite track in the QuickTime.
Got removed. I mean, I think it's fascinating. I mean, it's a way of product placement, isn't it? With product placement, but for it's easy. It's just a click to go there rather than go off and look, Google it on your phone or whatever, or have a QR
and at the moment,
code or...
at the moment you either need an NFC or a QR code to activate it. So it's not like that's going to be popping up in your face without you really wanting it. Otherwise, it's going to become Amazon on your face. So.
No, but if you follow it through to its logical progression, as you've got in Final Cut Pro 10, you've got a caption track that you can just put captions on. Are you saying that you end up having an API track that you say, for this scene, we have the sports goods API, and then when you watch it back on your Apple TV, it just takes, it just does it automatically for you?
So this isn't hyperbole. I've actually done this. I've actually coded this myself, and I got it to work. Yeah, there's something that you get on your radio, right? Whenever you're like driving down the road and you see like the title of your artist or whatever, you have what's called ID3 tags. All right, ID3 tags are metadata specific down to the frame rate, and the ability to inject time metadata into video, HLS specifically, is incredibly difficult, but once you get that workflow down, it's actually really easy. So if you build your workflow, really easy. But what I'm trying to say is, yes, you nailed it, Peter. The subtitle layers, we have yet to begin what we can really do with those. And these tools that they've created with app clips, paired with something like a subtitle track and being able to parse time metadata in real time, is going to be extremely powerful.
I think we have a new show here. It's called Felipe and Jace argue about the next gen of technology.
I think we can easily nerd out here for a long time.
Every Thursday at 4 p.m. Pacific time. Hey, we should wrap this up. It's been a great conversation. I want to thank everybody for coming and joining us. And I think we were all, impressed. And I don't know, maybe I'm the only one who's a little afraid of the future. But I want to thank OWC for helping us do this. Please go check out MacSales.com. We're going to have them on the show pretty soon and talk about... I have some specific storage solutions I need some help with. And then I also want to thank Industrial Revolution and Peter and all the cool plugins that he makes over there. So make sure you go check that out. We're going to wrap up this episode of the show. We're going to kill the live stream and probably invite a few people in who are attendees right now. And we'll just have a little meltdown and for a few minutes. But thank you, everybody. Wave goodbye. Say Imagine some really cool music playing here. Thanks for joining us. All right.